How's everybody doing this evening? As we continue in Romans, this is going to be fun tonight. Hope you guys are ready for this class this evening. Some interesting passages we're hopefully going to get to as we start into Romans. So we're going to pick up in chapter 12 and then work our way into 13. But before we do that, let's bow in a word of prayer. Our Almighty God and Father in heaven, what a blessing it is to be once again joined together with our brothers and sisters. We get this opportunity to spend time with your word and discuss it with one another and to learn better how you would have us to behave in this life. We thank you so much for the blessing that is. We pray that you would be with all of us that are here this evening, that we would focus and gain the most from this time that is before us. We're thankful for the freedom that we have to do this in this country. We pray that you'll be with those who are not with us this evening, whatever the reason may be, that you would comfort them, watch over them, and if it be your will, Father, bring them back to us the next time the doors are open. We're thankful for those who have been traveling and who've been returned safely. We are glad to have them back among us. We ask you to be with us again as we continue in our study. Help us to always look to you and your word for the guidance that we need, and always be mindful that Jesus was willing to suffer and die that we might one day have a home in heaven with you. We offer you this prayer in Jesus' most holy name. Amen. Okay, so we've got to back up a little bit in 12 because my notes where we ended last week were right at a question that I was going to ask you, and that question makes zero sense if it's not in context. So let's back up a little bit and read through verses 10 through 18 of chapter 12, which is where we left off, is in chapter 18. There it says, "Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor, not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men." And so the question that I was going to ask last week, and we ran out of time, is of this list of things that we just read, which ones are your favorites, or the ones that you think that you have a really good grasp on and you do really well?
That's two questions. One where we think we're good at, and another one that we like. So
You answer both however you feel.
So I can answer which one I like, but I can't
Okay.
say that I'm good at it.
Okay.
In the ESV in verse 10, it says, "Outdo one another by showing honor and showing honor." I think that's a tremendous concept. It's really hard to apply, but just to see people continually trying to one-up each other in a way that's honoring others, not themselves.
Right. No, I think that's good. I'm reading through the book about Homer Haley right now, the Churches of the 20th Century. I would recommend it to you, but I don't want to recommend it to you because it's depressing. Because it's nothing but this guy trying to outdo this guy, and it's not friendly, the competition that they have in these. Their version of Facebook was newspapers. They put out their own newspapers. And so that's exactly what you're talking about. They're trying to outdo each other continually. Anybody else?
Repeat that question.
Which of those that we just read do you either like or A, feel that you're pretty good at? Or B, feel that you're pretty good at?
Well, let's take verse 18. If possible, as far as it depends on
reverse of that question. What do you struggle with on this list? I'll go first. It's not necessarily pay back evil for evil for me, but if you've wronged me, it's a long time before I get over that hurt. I struggle with that. Ask my wife. I've had a couple of employees over the years, and when they left, I took it really personal. And it wasn't personal. They were trying to better themselves and go on to another job and make more money and all those things, but it's something I struggle with. Anybody else struggle with any of those things? I struggle with a lot of them. Or I'm continually working on them. How about that?
Well, it's like human nature, I think, that it's hard to bless those that persecute you. You want to persecute those that persecute you.
Right.
Or at least defend yourself, and that's clearly not what's
Sure.
called.
Sure. And that leads us perfectly into 19 to 21. Good job, Chad. You read ahead. Where there it says, never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, and I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And so we get this whole section. This is really interesting. And a lot of people can quote this. It's a famous passage. The quotes in 19 are from Deuteronomy 32, 35. And the quote in 20 is from Proverbs 25, 21, and 22. But have you ever had a person look at this and go, I've heard this before. Like, I'm praying for that person because I want those coals to be heaped on their head. Right? That's what it says there. If I pray for them, they're going to get coals heaped on their head. That's what I want to see. I want to see my enemy get coals heaped on them. You guys ever heard that? Maybe you've thought it. I've literally heard people say that before. If you are blessing your enemy so that you can see him be punished, you've missed verse 9. Let love be without hypocrisy. This is the poetic language from Proverbs that we're using here. This isn't meant to be serious, like I'm going to pray because I want coals to fall on this guy's head. Some versions include the phrase, to the contrary, in the ESV. Exactly the opposite of revenge is caring for your enemy. This is more than just refraining from returning evil for evil. If you're leading the transformed life, which is what we're talking about here in chapter 12, because of all the stuff we've seen leading up to this, you are now transformed in your life, or should be, and be working on all of these things. You will not just wait for the enemy to get what they deserve. You've got to have a positive, loving attitude towards them, is what he's getting at here. The result of that is that they're going to look even worse when things go your way and you prove them, you're doing good to them and they're being evil to you. They look even worse, which is the burning coals part. I want to see them, but that isn't what the goal of that is. You're to be kind to your enemy. They may or may not recognize it. They may not know that that's how you feel about them, but it will be there and it will be noticed because the people around you will say, how can you have feelings like that about this guy? This guy did all these bad things to you. How can you possibly be willing to forgive him or have forgiven him already? Because I was forgiven. I was forgiven when I was in the wrong. And so I can forgive like I was forgiven. That's what he's driving at here. Is that a comment, Jay?
By doing, like we're doing, like going on verse 20 there, that leads you right into verse 21 where, do not be conquered by evil, but conquer evil with good. That's
Absolutely. Yep. All those things that we just read through are the tools that you've got at your disposal to treat that person. Because what's the ultimate goal of that? Do I want that person to continue to be my enemy? No. What is our goal for other people as Christians?
To bring people to Christ. And your actions are always going to speak louder than your words. And our first reaction when we're hurt is to lash back.
Sure.
It's a learned and it's automatic, and people expect it, I think. We live in this dog-eat-dog society, and that's not good. And so when we turn the other cheek or show a different way, it can have a huge impact.
Right. Right. And what's the saying? People don't remember what you said to them, they remember how you made them feel. Something to that effect. That's paraphrasing, but that's the same idea, that your actions are what are going to draw people. And that's the ultimate goal of all of this. Not to continue to have enemies, not to see your enemy punished. You want to bring your enemy along with you, so they're not your enemy anymore. Any more questions or comments about that before we move on to chapter 13, excuse me? No? Okay. So, really quickly, two major sections of chapter 13, submission to government authorities and living in love and light are the two main divisions. I mean, you could divide that a million ways probably, but those are the two big divisions in chapter 13. Some big words that come up here that are important: submit, hypotasso, to place oneself under authority. Paul urges voluntary submission to government here. Authorities, the governing powers or rulers, and then God, the word theos there, which is where we get our word theology from. Theos is God. So verses 1 through 8 of this are, well, actually 1 through 7 really are the part that everybody, for me, this is difficult stuff here to work through. What we saw in 12:9 through 21, that's how to love everyone. This is in 13:1 through 10, and maybe down farther, is how we're supposed to love the government. And what we see is some people look at this and they say, this is completely disconnected from chapter 12. Like, it feels like Paul just went way over here. And you wait, Paul, wait, come back. Come back over here and talk to us about what you were talking to us about. It's lots of, and there are even commentators who say that this wasn't even Paul that wrote this, that this was inserted later by scribes, and I don't agree to any of that, but you may see that somewhere, that they feel like that's how hard a shift that this takes, that somebody stuck this in there when Paul wasn't looking. This is why, one of the reasons why our chapter breaks that we put in there causes some problems. Because for me, when I see that chapter break, my mind goes, okay, somebody smarter than me separated this. This must be a new thought, new section, whatever. But what he's describing in these first 7 verses is like, and we'll read them here in a second, but it's like the flip side of the coin from 12. If you can't take, or the end part of 12, the last few verses of 12, don't take vengeance, vengeance belongs to God. And so if you can't take action against the wicked as a Christian, does that mean that they have free reign, that they go unchecked, that they're not punished? Does that mean that Christians have to fear them? No. That's why God set up governments into chapter 12. You are not supposed to take the law into your own hands. God is going to deal with it. And that's where we get to in chapter 13. And keep in mind that Paul is talking about the ideal government here in these verses, when it's working precisely the way God intended it to. And we know that because in verse 3, where it says, and I'm going to skip ahead here for a second, where it says, that's 12. For the rulers are not the cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authorities? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. The government does not always praise people for doing good. And this is, obviously not just, we've got to get outside of thinking this is only talking about the American government, which that probably applies to them as well. But think about the government in Germany, and there's people burning books. The government said this is the thing you're supposed to do, and there are people who didn't want to burn the books. Were they getting praised for doing what was right and not burning books? No, they were not. So governments don't always behave the way we think they should. So Paul's speaking of this in terms of the ideal government. Let's read through 1 through 7 real quick, and then we'll circle back around. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinances of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. You want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on one who practices evil. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjection, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render to all what is due them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom is due, fear to whom fear is due, or fear to whom fear, and honor to whom honor. So we'll stop there. And so, does anybody else, does this passage give anybody else problems? Do you read this and wonder just exactly what you're supposed to do with this, how to apply it? Am I alone in that? No? Good. And so if you are thinking that I'm going to give you the exact right answer for this, you're going to be disappointed. Because I don't have the exact right answer. And I think that's okay. I think that's part of what is happening here, and I'll get to that in just a second. So there's a couple of main views of this. I'm going to present them, and I'm going to tell you where I land on this, and then we can discuss it and see what everybody thinks. So there's the absolute submission view, that means you've got to do everything that the government says. And that's what the text says. It's absolute language. You must. You have to do this. So jaywalking, that's a sin. I'm not going to make it into heaven because that's a law. If I cut the tag off of my mattress, which it says right on there, unlawful to remove, that's going against this. Why does the government care if I cut that tag off my mattress? Anyway, that's a side point we don't really care about. And so if you go against God's will here, if it goes, and there's one caveat to this view, that if it goes against God's will, you've got to follow God's will over the law of the land. With me so far? View number one, okay? The second idea is this idea, they call it limited or qualified submission, is the second view of this. It's more the idea that Paul is giving kind of general guidelines And obedience to the government may not be absolute. Again, he's speaking about the ideal role of government. And so I'm going to go through how I see this play out. So the one thing that I do think is going on here is that there are three main principles at play in this set of verses. The first one is God is in control. That's what he wants you to see in 1 through 7. God is in control. The second thing is do what is good. You guys who are now Christians need to do what is good. And the third thing is you have to expect punishment for evil. If you don't do what is good, you're going to be punished. Okay? It's three main principles is kind of what's going on here. So let's start with the absolute submission view. This means you need to obey every law. Like I said, from jaywalking to leaving that tag on your mattress. The language here is absolute. But let's say that Jeff holds this view. Someday we're going to get a Jeff in the congregation. I won't be able to use him anymore. What's the first thing Jeff does? I've already done it. When Jeff says, this is absolute, jaywalking, not okay, because the government says jaywalking is not okay. What's the first thing that Jeff does in that situation? Okay, all right. You went to practical application, but I meant when he's explaining his view of this to you, what's the first thing Jeff's going to do? He's going to make the caveat that it's absolute unless it goes against God's will. So Jeff's opened up a loophole already in his view, which isn't in the text. You got to go other places for that. You got to go to Peter. Okay? Jeff points to Acts 5:29 to talk about Peter. Peter says, obey God rather than men. So Jeff's already put a hole in this absolute idea. And then the question becomes, well, how do we apply this? How do you apply that in your life? And so, have any of you guys ever heard this saying before, that we commit 3 felonies a day? Anybody's ever heard that? There's actually this guy here, this Harvey A. Silvergate, wrote this book that is titled 3 Felonies a Day. And he, in this book, the entire subject is about the fact that we commit 3 felonies a day, and he's not using it as hyperbole. He honestly believes that we could be potentially committing 3 felonies a day. The federal laws are so confusing that even lawyers can't figure them all out. They don't line up with one another. And the 3 main areas where we could unknowingly commit a felony, just things that are common to all of us these days. Email usage, because you didn't read the fine print. Website usage, because you didn't read the fine print. And anything related to like slander or defamation, you could say an offhanded comment and someone could misconstrue that as slander against someone and take you to court for that. And you could be held liable for slander. And even those of us who don't use email or websites, slander is a hard one. Could be a hard one to avoid. Just an offhanded comment with no ill intent could be twisted by the courts. What do you do with the idea that state and federal laws don't line up with one another? That's a very common thing. The most glaring and regrettable to me is the fact that marijuana usage is legal in Washington and many other states. but it's still federally illegal. The point that I'm making here is that all of this that I'm making with all this is that if this is absolute submission they're talking about in these verses, God's asked you to do something you can't do. It is physically impossible for me to follow every guideline that exists right now in this country. I don't believe that our just God would ask me to do something I can't do, that I am incapable of doing. And this was just as true during the times that this was written. The laws in Rome were just as confusing. They were constantly changing. And how do you get those rules to every citizen? How do you get those rules before poor and uneducated people who can't read or, that it's, think about how difficult that would have been before we've got this wonderful thing called the internet and texting and all that, where we can ship information around in a second. And so this pushes me back to this principle that I started with that we're to take from this. God is in control. Do what is good. Expect punishment for evil. That's why I said I didn't think I could give you an exact answer about everything you want to know about. I can't tell you what to do about jaywalking. Why? Because of verse 5. Verse 5 says, for conscience sake. That makes all of this about the individual. And that really ties nicely into chapter 14, which we'll hopefully get to next week, depending on discussion that ensues after this. But chapter 14 is about two things mainly. Don't judge a weaker brother, and don't do anything that's going to cause a brother to stumble. And 14:4 says, who am I to judge the servant of another? So that makes this whole section individual for Daniel to figure out, and for Krista to figure out, and for Sean to figure out. Now, I'm not suggesting that that means we can do whatever we want. It's the same kind of argument as that when you say grace, and people say, oh, but grace doesn't give you a license to do whatever you want. That's the same thing that's going on here. You're supposed to want to do what is good. But if you and I don't see the same on an issue that's not salvation in relation to this, that's okay. Steve and Randy can have different views about the speed limit. And I know that they do because he asked me about it. Does that make sense? Am I way off the mark here? Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I'm just going to bring up something. These verses right here, along with what 1 Peter says in 1 Peter 2, were in play about 4 or 5 years ago, big time. If you remember back to COVID, and there were so many different views on this.
Absolutely.
People couldn't agree on it. Everybody had an opinion on it. Churches divided over it.
Absolutely.
The terribleness of what happened. Individuals got mad at one another over it. So it's not an easy thing. You look at it, before then we probably looked at it and said, that's pretty easy. But after COVID, we decided maybe it wasn't quite so easy as you tried to explain tonight. So, just a thought.
Even, I'm still not saying it's easy, because I have to be willing to let Randy drive at 59 miles an hour because he won't go 2 or 3 over with the rest of traffic and not complain about it. right? This is not an easy subject. I totally get that. But I feel like as much as he spends his time talking about unity, he's talked through all of this with the Jews and the Gentiles and tried to bring these two groups back together from 1 to 11. This gives them the opportunity to work together and not necessarily have to agree on every last little thing that comes up that isn't the gospel or the plan of salvation or the things that are going to keep you out of heaven. Any other comments or thoughts on that? Did I make that too simple? Did not enough thought go into that? Or are we good? I'm open to discussing it for sure. It doesn't bother me if somebody wants to make a point for the other way of looking at this.
I don't want to open up the flood.
Hey, go for it, man. I want to hear it.
I for one do see that if something is brought to our attention, especially like concerning jaywalking, I'm also big on speed. I think it's there for a reason, and that's the standard. And if we see that, but we think in our heads, I can go this much over, I can go that much below, then we're not following it. So I kind of see it that way. That I don't
Sure.
think that's the way we should do things, especially when it says when you have up there, do what is good. Well, what would be good concerning looking at the speed and following it? So that's just my side of things.
Sure. No, I wrestle with this too. I'm in the same boat. But we all know that we don't follow like every last. Do you always do the speed limit?
I definitely try to.
Okay.
Well, trying's not enough, Daniel.
Now you got what is it called? You press it and then it drives.
Cruise control.
Cruise control. It keeps to that speed. So
Unless your car's off, you don't
Yeah.
realize it.
Yeah. You put bigger tires. Hey, put bigger tires on that thing, and it's the calibration's all off, man.
yeah, but the thing is, so if you're looking at it to where you say, yeah, I see the speed limit, but I'm okay to go 2 over or 5 over, and that's just your mindset. Like, how is that right? Like, if you're looking at it, it says 35. You say, yeah, I can go 40. I just can't see that as being okay. If it says it's there for a reason, it's a standard.
Okay. But that's for you. Because it says it's for conscience sake. So if it doesn't bother Randy's conscience, then well, okay. Randy's not the right example. Okay. Who are my speeders in the room? Yeah. Okay, Matt. So if it doesn't bother Matt's conscience, it's not for. I don't feel like. But go ahead, Randy.
Well, the reason why I feel so strongly about it is, I've talked to a lot of people about it over the years, and it doesn't say suggested speed 35. Based on the weather conditions, it says speed limit. That word limit limits you, I think, to 35. And as a Christian, I think these things we should do as much as we can, be at peace with all men, and just do what's right. So I have a habit now. I was late. I was late 3 minutes late tonight. And I could have easily gone 5 over on the back road to get here and get on time. But I said, no, I'm going to drive.
Okay, so I'm gonna play devil's advocate here.
That's just me.
You're on I-5 doing 60 because that's the speed limit.
Yep.
And the people are driving around you honking mad because you're only doing 60. Are you at peace with all men?
I'm at peace with God, and that's what matters.
But it says be at peace with all men. As long as so much as it be so.
Possible.
Well, I was just gonna say, on the grand scheme of things, because it's just like what you were saying with, in that book, 3 felonies a day, right? You could get wrapped around the axle and your conscience would never be clean if you knew every single thing that you did wrong all day long.
Right.
And so there becomes a should you go 35? At the end of the day, I don't think it's what's going to keep you out of going to heaven if you went 40 all your life. But
You better hope not.
If I cheat on my taxes knowingly every single year, that probably has more consequences to it than me going 40 and a 35.
Yeah, but a sin is a sin.
Because biblically, you can point to how I'm cheating out of the government versus a speed limit. And again, you still may be committing a sin that you don't even know about. And if you want to use that as your measure that a sin is a sin, well, we're all doomed. It's over. We've all sinned. And you all keep sinning, just like I do.
Daily, right?
And so it's one of those things where it's a fun topic and it can be a passionate topic, but it also, you have to kind of bring it back and say, okay, what am I trying to achieve or gain out of this knowledge and
Sure.
apply it to my life? And what does God really want me to do with this information? Now, if it keeps you up at night that you're going 38 and 35, fine, do 35. No one here is going to make too much fun of you, Daniel. But that's just the way it's going to be, right? And he has to be at peace with that. But if we all knew every single law that we were breaking according to that book, I don't think any of us would sleep at night.
Right.
And so
And again, that's the
that's the
thing.
point of the book.
Do good,
Yeah.
expect punishment for evil. So when you get pulled over, don't complain.
You don't complain about getting the speeding
Yeah.
ticket.
And again, we could sit here and I don't want to waste a whole bunch more time because we could go through every little thing and, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? But that's why this says it's for conscience sake. It's for you to decide. Your guideline as a Christian is do what is good. But what that looks like, and again, there's that fine line of I'm not excusing jaywalking or 35 miles or 5 miles an hour over the speed limit. Steve.
Well, I think you're going to get into this more in chapter 14. But, you say for conscience sake, and I think that as you look at the big picture here, it's encouraging. You have to encourage yourself to respect everybody's conscience. And back to the COVID deal, there was so much anger and division. Wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. And could you let one person have a mask, and could the person that's not wearing a mask, for conscience sake or whatever, you bring the conscience sake into it.
Yeah.
And you're gonna get into it here in chapter 14.
Yeah, and that's exactly where, everybody went to study when that whole thing happened. What do we do with this? Well, some people did. But at any rate, so really quickly in this section, there's something interesting in verse 4. That word minister there is the word for deacon. It's diakonos is the word that's there. And so some people will say that when we read about Phoebe and she's a deacon, that means that she was a deacon in the church. If we're going to use that word that way, we've got to use it here, and that means the government needs to be a deacon in this building because it says they're a deacon. When you look at the qualifications for a deacon, they are clearly set up for a male. And so that's minister, it's someone who's ministering. And that's what Phoebe was doing. I don't think that she was a deacon in the church. And I don't mean to take that in a, man versus woman direction in any way, shape, or form, but people will try and use that. And here's an example where it's used, and we can't just take the word because it could be the word deacon and say those people are now deacons. The government is not a deacon in this building, nor should they ever be, right? And then we get into verses 6 and 7, and this is the things that the government generally demands of its citizens. They want their tax. They want custom, which this is monetary customs, like what we would consider a tariff. This isn't custom in terms of behaving in a certain way, like it's the custom of these people to do this thing, that thing. This is a monetary thing still here, separate from tax. The government wants you to fear or have proper respect of them. This is the word phobos there, where we get our word phobia. And then they want honor. They want you to value them as the government that's doing the things theoretically in your best interest. Those are the things that are common to all governments. And then verse 8. Any more, one last shot of comments there before we move on? Everybody good? All right. Verse 8 says, "Owe nothing to anyone except to love one another, for he who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law." And so this is a really nice bookend for this section for us, because we started in 12:9 with "let love be without hypocrisy." And then we go through all of these things that means. Love is all of the things that he lists between 12:9 and 13:8. This is the way you love. This is the way you love everyone. This is the way you love the government. And he ends it here again by basically saying the same thing. Owe nothing to anyone except to love one another, for he who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law. Many people will quote this and say, well, this is the don't get into debt verse. But I don't think that's what's going on here. There are verses that warn against that, Deuteronomy 28:12, 15:6, several places in Proverbs. But I think the context is something different here, and it starts back in verse 12. As we work through all of these things on how to treat one another, and then about the ideas about treating the government, he says, owe nothing to anyone. It's the idea that you're not obligated to them because you treated them the way that they were supposed to be treated. What you are obligated to do is to love them. Put God first because he's in control, and love other people. And that means that you're going to do these things that we've just read about out of love. Love of God will prompt you to obey the government. Paul told the Corinthians that a spiritual person is judged by no one. 1 Corinthians 2:15. He's not saying that you can't be judged. He's saying that you're above that because you're living spiritually. And since you are above it, just like Jesus was above all of that, but he put himself under that for our sakes. He subjected himself for our sakes. So no, owe nothing to anyone except to love them. If you love them and hypocrisy is present, you still owe them something. Because that's not love. Because loving them fulfills the law. Remember earlier in the book we talked about how through Christ we are keeping the law perfectly. This is where he tells us that again. Here we are. It's possible to keep the law through Christ because he showed us what love is. And you can keep the law because Christ taught us about love. And then that leads us into verse 9, which I'm out of time for. Any comments or questions before we pick that up next week? No? Everybody good? All right. Thank you.